what I was going to tie that into was, if y'all attended the Beyond AI conversation that happened, Lily was a part of it as well. If you noticed, each and every one of those panelists very distinctly said, yes, we do use AI, but we use it within our intuition and gut and sensitivity and understanding. That's effectively what you're talking about, bringing in the human part and kind of controlling it, policing the temperature, depending on how you want to do it, right? Okay, let's go to the question.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, maybe people want to. Oh,
yeah. This kind of dovetails a little bit on that. So I'm interested in the whole topic of like build versus buy. So like I sit in a seat where I'm using external research from other vendors that are all creating their own LLMs, right? I have the capability of building my own. If you're using other people's LLMs, can you give any kind of guidance or tips on like what you want to know about that LLM in terms of the data that you're then coming back that you're ultimately using? Because obviously ideally everyone wants to put it in their own box, right, and control everything. But when you're at scale and you don't have access to all of that, and we talked about it in the panel a minute ago about like data, right? There's only so much can be scraped, but then there's data that you have in-house, and everybody's going to have their own rich data that they have in their own, you know, how much do you want to buy? How much do you want to spend on this? If you're using that, it'd be helpful, at least in my seat, to understand what types of questions should you be asking these vendors in terms of how they built their model, the quality of the data that's coming in, to drive that confidence, and that I don't necessarily have to build everything in-house. I can use an external vendor. So it's kind of like quality all in one.
So there's I'm going to skip the technical answer, that there are, like most models, they will publicize how it's trained, or at least the source of data, and they will publicize some degrees of attempts at measuring accuracy. So that's a start, but let's not talk about that. I think what we're really talking about is what are the vendors' policies themselves. So I would often go straight to their privacy policy. Where's this data going? How's it being used when they're training it? Maybe they have a third party who made it for them even. A lot of them are just like third, fourth parties removed from the actual training data set itself. Right. So if that's the case, you don't have the ability to answer. So you could ask very honestly, how have you trained it? If they can't give you an answer, that's a problem. Ask for the privacy statements, but also I've been getting great tips. When you're writing contracts to ultimately use some of these tools, you can ask for the more sophisticated APIs, demand it, that you have a transparent report on where it was built or where the data goes. But I do want to say, we often think about the risks of privacy, we often think about the risks of bias, but you brought up something that is far too forgotten, which is worth a card, which is that Time magazine released an article a couple years ago that said that I think it was OpenAI was caught spending $1 a day on Kenyan workers to retrain its grotesque and like racist material when it first came out. It was very problematic because remember, it said we learned from the web. Well, guess what? The web is filled with the best and the worst of humanity.
Yes.
I mean, we've got academic evidence of these models you pipe in translation services, like there's a great example in academia of English to Hungarian, like he is a doctor, or she is a doctor, he is a nurse, and it would keep flipping it when they translated it to she is a nurse and he is a doctor. Stuff like that, or gender recognition, it would kept assuming you're a male if there was a computer in the background, even if you had every phenotype of a woman. So, but on this Time example, so because they were trying to counter all of this bad training, they were displaying terrible imagery material, and they had to say that's bad, that's good, that's bad, that's good, with no labor protections like that. And most people don't know, and we use these models. These models are out there, but that's how they were counter-trained. And they still are to this day. I don't think they've changed their practices just because of that Time article. I could be wrong about that, but
on the build